Welcome to Juniper Level Botanic Garden, Plant Delights Nursery Summer Open House. We're going to take a quick little run around the garden to highlight a few things of note in mid-July garden. So let's get started. Feel free to ask questions as we go along. Certainly daylilies are part of the summer garden. This is sort of the tail end of the main season daylilies. There are some that bloom a lot later. This is a person who this was bred by a person who's better known for his epimediums, but this is Cobblewood Yellow Peaks. It's a nice late blooming daylily. All right, Kit Kat. We are going to quickly pass through the shade garden, but actually I'll stop right here. A lot of plants are either showstoppers, things with big glorious flowers like lilies that are in bloom for 2 weeks and then that's it for the year. And there are other things that bloom for months and months and months that maybe are never a showstopper. And this Caryopteris willmottianum, it will bloom all summer long into fall, and it often has a bit more flowers that we see this morning, but it's a lovely true blue flower. Okay. Good morning.
Good morning. That's what's in the back, though, in the back garden.
Summertime, I think of being a time for lots of flowers out in the sun garden, not so much in the shade garden, but a really great plant for flowers in the shade garden, a perennial one, a winter hardy perennial, is Begonia grandis. It's very winter hardy for a begonia. I grew up near New York City and it was winter hardy in those gardens back during the Ice Age. It's just starting now, but will bloom for a couple months, often continuing into fall. We have our own selection called pink teardrops, which really just keeps on blooming for months and months. They completely disappear in the winter, but return every spring. And we're going to see some Hedychiums, ginger lilies, out in the sun garden, but I want to make the point that though most of the common ginger lilies do best with a lot of sun, there are some species with very thin textured leaves. I'm going to grab one so you can compare them, that actually prefer a shady location. Now I think you can overdo shade, and this thing would bloom more if it had like a few hours of sun, but you put one of these Hedychiums, ginger lilies, that prefers shade out in the sun and the foliage looks miserable. Whereas the ones that are sun worshippers, you can put them out in the hottest place and they'll look great all summer long. This is Hedychium densiflorum, the cultivar Stephen, however you pronounce that person's name. Alrighty, well, let's go this way. Oh, okay. Dahlias. Palani. This is a more typical ginger lily, and you see the leaf is stiffer and thicker, whereas this is thin and papery. I don't know if I'll pass those around. Excuse me. And you can feel that the difference between those two. The thicker leaf is one that tolerates full sun, and that thinner one is better in shade. But this is a hybrid called Palani. I don't know that we produce this one, but there are so many selections that are exactly the same color. Some of them are fragrant. This might be just barely fragrant, and some of them are fragrant in the evening. But once they start blooming, they'll bloom for quite a while. You know, this is a young inflorescence that will be another few weeks before it blooms. And all of the Hedychiums are herbaceous. They die to the ground in the winter, and they grow from a rhizome that looks just like the culinary ginger, which is a close relative in the same family. Oh, this is a better view of the Hedychium from here. And you know, that's a really tall one. A lot of the Hedychiums are in the 4 to 5 foot range, but there are little, what's the early orange one that is so good? Yes, there's a Hedychium that's about that same color that started blooming maybe almost 2 months ago, and it's only about this tall. It's Slim's Orange. But this is Phlox paniculata, commonly called the summer phlox. And it's a native herbaceous perennial, native to a good part of eastern U.S. Certainly when you go up into the mountains in North Carolina, it's a common roadside plant. This is more typical of the wild type. It has smaller flowers than the big fancy hybrids. But what we care most about with any Phlox paniculata selection is one where the foliage stays clean, because a very common problem is powdery mildew, where the leaves get discolored with white powdery mildew. And if you have a Phlox paniculata that routinely gets powdery mildew, remove it from the garden and buy a new selection. And they're blooming for months. I think we saw a butterfly a few minutes ago, really highly favored by butterflies. And one head blooms for a long time, but when it's done blooming, it's not producing any more florets. Just cut it down low, and they usually will produce side shoots with additional flowers. They have a fragrance, maybe a little bit more at night. Rudy, okay. I should say that phlox are something that deer will eat in the garden. There are a number of hibiscus in this garden. They don't have to have a soggy site, but they love a soggy site if you have one. They will do perfectly well in average soil. You're wasting your time with most hibiscus if you plant them in a very dry spot. They won't die, but they won't be worthwhile. But this is typical of a wild hibiscus, much smaller flowered than the big hybrid ones. Now the hybrid ones are much more fertile. I think I said that backwards. The wild species are much more fertile. The hybrid ones don't produce that many pods, but you see it's been blooming for a while and it has all these pods down below. And they remain really beautiful all winter long. We don't cut these down until very late winter, early spring, because the seed pods are so beautiful, and they do a really good job of standing up all winter. It's not something you have to do, but I think, sometimes our reaction is to immediately cut anything down after frost has turned it brown, but a lot of herbaceous perennials are really beautiful with their seeds in the summer. This is Hibiscus coccineus, and coccineus means scarlet, and one of the common names for this one is the scarlet hibiscus or Texas star, but this is a white form of it. I remember as a kid seeing somebody growing the plant and it wasn't yet in bloom, and I thought they were growing marijuana. But it's just another hibiscus, and the typical red one is what introduced a lot of the red pigment in the modern hybrids. Again, these stems are sort of pleasant. Well, this is an albino, so there's no red pigment in its stems, but the typical red flowered form would have purpley red stems all summer, and then they turn silvery in the winter. And then again, the seed pods are really beautiful. Alrighty. Oh, okay. There are many species of true lilies in the genus Lilium, and many hybrids. Humans have been hybridizing lilies for probably a couple centuries or more. But this is a selection of a wild species, a Japanese species, Lilium speciosum. Speciosum means very showy. We've grown many different selections of Lilium speciosum, and they don't tend to persist for long in the garden. But this is one we've been growing for probably 20 years or so. There's not much left here because last year I dug up the whole clump and sent all the small bulbs to our nursery bed so we could increase it and eventually have it for sale for our customers. But Lilium speciosum is a real beauty. All the lilies are really good cut flowers if you can bear to remove any from the garden. And you'll see, well, there's a wasp on that flower, but the big butterflies will visit the flowers as well. And this selection we named 4th of July because it's usually in bloom at that time. Alrighty. And since we were just talking about Lilium speciosum, I'll mention Lilium formosanum, which is one of the easiest lilies to grow. We cut off the seed pods before the seeds are shed because it produces so many seedlings in the garden. But these are big white trumpets, so in August, the orange various cone flowers. This is one of the orange cone flowers, Rudbeckia fulgida, really great summer plants. This compact Joe Pye weed, Eupatorium, is just starting to bloom. Both plants are North American natives. Both occur in the eastern US, and both are great pollinator plants. When Joe Pye weed is in bloom, it's like visiting an insect zoo. Really wonderful. All right. You know, I always probably focus too much on flowering things, but you know, this time of year there's lots of really beautiful foliage plants, and most people know that the Amorphophallus, the voodoo lilies, have a big stinky flower, but all summer long the foliage is really beautiful. This is a yellow leaf selection, Gordon's Gold, and they grow from a big tuber underground and they disappear come frost, but they return every year. It's a big genus, most are tropical, but there are I don't know, a dozen or two species that are winter hardy in zone 7B. All right. Which way shall we go? Alrighty. This is a hybrid Hibiscus Red Flyer that is close to its Hibiscus coccineus parent, but with a much larger flower. And oh, this is a different selection of the ginger lily we saw growing in the shade, the Hedychium densiflorum, but the burning of the foliage is because it doesn't really want to be out in hot sun. This isn't sun first thing in the morning. This faces south, so the sun has to come around, but then from probably late morning it's in sun the rest of the day. It blooms real heavily in this much sun, but I would want to put it in a slightly shadier spot so the foliage still remained. And the main reason why I want to point out that there are some ginger lilies that bloom in light shade is that most people who know the ginger lilies think that they all must have full sun locations, but they don't. And this is also a nice height. It's about 4 feet tall, so not as large as many of the other ginger lilies. And ginger lilies, that whole family, tend not to be eaten by deer. I never say 100% certainty, because usually when I'm talking to a crowd, somebody will say, they eat them in my garden. And another, the Amorphophallus is in the aroid family, as are elephant ears, the colocasias, and that family also tend not to be eaten by deer. Now, humans eat a few of them. The elephant ears we grow as ornamentals are just ornamental selections of taro, one of the most important food crops in the world, especially in tropical parts of the world. But these are just ornamental forms. And though humans eat them, and they do eat the bulb of that species of Amorphophallus, they have to be cooked first because they're not edible before then. But you know, a beautiful foliage plant that is just thrilled that it's hot and humid. And many salvias. This is a Guaranitica hybrid. I see a bunch of bees flying on it, but any plant this time of year with a long tubular flower is going to be visited by hummingbirds. And this salvia, this type of salvia, is really great plant to have if you're tired of filling up your hummingbird feeder. Plant enough of this and they won't miss their hummingbird feeder. Well, these tours are never meant to be comprehensive, just a brief introduction to the garden. So thank you for attending, and I invite you to see the sun garden that is full of blooming things, and then the shade gardens are really beautiful this time of year, but it's mostly really beautiful foliage. Any questions before we stop?
No, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Into your tour.
Okay. Yeah, we have, we call them Garden Unplugged, brief classes at every open house every day, generally 2 each day. In the summer, the classes are at 10 and 11. The milder times of the year, we have them at 10 and 2. And you can see our schedule of classes ahead of open house on our website.
You were talking about one phlox was sensitive to mildew and one was not.
Yeah.
We lost
The
purples and we kept our whites.
Yeah, the whites are beautiful, but the purples got lost.
One of the oldest phlox cultivars that was promoted as being mildew resistant was a really good white one, and that might be what you have, one called David. Yeah, that, yeah,
Actually.
yeah, that,
A little luck on our part.
yeah, well,
Garden.
and you know, plants often behave differently in different climates. We work with a breeder who's breeding in, I always forget, you know, somewhere in the upper Midwest where it gets really cold and the summers are not super hot. And he's sometimes surprised that things he has bred don't get mildew in his climate, and they come down here and they do. So,
Thank you again.
sure.
Thank you so much.
Sure.